Hello and welcome to the home of the Ghost Owl, and we're back looking at Warhammer The Old World, continuing at the Empire faction focus, now looking at the core units, how they played in 8th edition, how they might play in Warhammer The Old World. Now the Empire certainly has an awful lot of core units, in fact has the most core units we've seen so far out of all the armies we've covered. However, you'll find a lot of them are pretty much cut and paste. Let's take a look. So first up, we've got what is a classic sort of poster child unit, if you like, of the Empire, which are the Halberdiers. Stats-wise, average everything with good leadership for core infantry, but they do have low initiative. They do come with the halberd and light armor with an option for shields. They have a unit size of 10. They get a full command characters. Now you do have the special rules, which is regimental unit and detachment, and that's essentially, if you make it a regimental unit, you can add a detachment on the side which is attached to that unit. So for example, when you've got your Archlector or Warrior Priest in the unit and he gives buffs to that regimental unit that he's in, but also to the detachment as well. The main thing is the detachment must remain within range of the regimental unit to count. So, you know, if you are attaching missile infantry, you're going to have to keep them fairly close by. So it is a basic line infantry unit. It's more expensive than the spears, but cheaper than the swordsman. It's my go-to unit of infantry. I actually quite like the halberds compared to spears and swords. I normally fielded them as a regimental unit of 20 plus, with a detachment of handgunners on the side, and mainly took 2 blocks in this configuration. So I'd have 2 units of 20 plus, both of them taking a detachment of handgunners, which would be smaller, but would certainly add to some of the damage. And normally I'd be thinking about putting warrior priests to buff these units. Though, you know, depending on your heroes and your army list composition, you know, you're not going to have a hero for every single infantry block. But the fact the Empire heroes are so cheap, and the fact that you'd obviously keep them quite cheap, you wouldn't be far away. So it wouldn't be that difficult to get a warrior priest into these units and still cover your more elite infantry as well. Now, the interesting thing here, let's say this is the copy and paste, and it was a copy and paste also in the kit itself. So, interestingly, with a lot of unit entries, you have a core infantry unit, and then it gets weapon options. While in the Empire book, what they actually did was they made each of the weapon options a separate unit entry in the army list, which was quite interesting, but they have nothing else different in terms of rules. So, you've got the same stat line, the same low initiative, equipment. They've got the same with the light armor with the option for shields. They can just change the spear for a halberd and vice versa. Same unit size and the same full command, same special rules, detachment and regimental. Now they're 1 point cheaper than the halberd. So what they were doing here is, I just don't understand, because you go, okay, so they're changing the unit cost per model, but you could just put the basic infantry profile, have them with spears, and for plus 1 point you could give them halberds, and for plus 2 point you could give them swords and shields. But they made them separate army or core unit entries in the army list. Quite odd. But overall, they're 1 point cheaper than the halberds. Overall, I preferred the plus 1 strength over the fight in extra rank, which is what you get from the spears. I think the plus 1 strength is more flexible in terms of the different units that you'll be engaging. Though, you know, spears could definitely be a better option against those lower toughness line infantry, such as zombies or Skaven slaves, where those extra attacks count. But the plus 1 strength meant that if you were taking on different units, you would have a lot more option of at least dealing some damage to them, particularly if you are, you know, getting those re-rolls to wound from your warrior priest. That plus 1 strength can really help you, even with sort of toughness 5 plus enemy models. So overall, I think the halberds are better, though the spears were 1 point cheaper. So the final entry in this basic melee infantry, for want of a better term, in the Empire. Again, all the same stat lines. This time, though, you do get your hand weapon with your shield included in the price. However, they are the most expensive. Unit size 10 plus and everything else the same. Now, they're the same price as halberdiers if you pay the extra 1 point for a halberdier to have a shield. So a halberdier plus a shield is the same price as a swordsman with a shield included in the profile. So there's no difference in prices. It's all accounted for in the equipment. Now, the trade-off is +1 weapon skill for +1 strength of the halberd. So you do get a slight different stat profile. You get +1 weapon skill. To be honest, again, I prefer the halberds. I think the options there are more options of improving hit, not so many options of improving strength. So rerolls to hit you can get in all sorts of things, and you can also get them in spells. There are very few options where you get a big buff to the strength. So I think it's easier to mitigate the weakness of the halberdiers, which is their weapon skill, than it is to mitigate the weakness of the swordsman, which is their strength. So that is why generally I prefer the halberdiers over the swordsman as a whole. That brings us to the end of our melee infantry. Next up, we've got our crossbowmen. So now moving on to the ranged infantry. So same stat lines as we've already seen from the infantry, but this time they come with a crossbow and a hand weapon. Unit size is 10 plus. Again, full command and so on. Now, this is my choice of a dedicated ranged regimental unit, and by that I mean not a detachment. So if I was going to take a dedicated ranged unit as a regimental choice, you take the crossbows with a wizard in the unit. Now, I preferred handgunners for detachments, but you've got strength 4, 30-inch range with the crossbows. It's better for a move or fire unit, so they're going to be more static. You've got the wizard, they're going to be at the back. The handguns don't have the same range, so you can keep these guys a bit further back and they'll still have impact on the battle. So a dedicated unit of crossbows behind the main line with the wizard in, giving you that 30-inch range. Very, very nice, and strength 4 is pretty good. However, moving on to another option, which is the handgunners, and again, these guys have no difference in stats between them. The only difference is they changed the crossbow out for a handgun. This is a good option for detachments, smaller units of ranged troops. They've got strength 4, but with armor piercing, so they can really help the halberdiers out dealing with tougher elite infantry, particularly those with lots of armor save. They do have the move or shoot, which means they may not be shooting every turn. But, shooting someone that's about to charge you, pretty nice. If you got any options of or shooting before you charge an enemy unit as well, they, again, like I say, you have to be careful with the fact they are move or shoot. But the other thing they can do, of course, is protect the flanks of your halberdier units. If your halberdiers do engage an enemy unit and someone's going to threaten their flank, you've got these guys that can either move block in the worst case, or in the best case can get the shooting out there as well. And like I say, that strength 4 with armor piercing can really help out there. They are range 24, so they got less range than the crossbows, but still pretty it's the damage output of them. They're pretty reliable at killing those tougher, more armored units. So the final one up here is the archers. Again, same stat line. The only change is changing the bow out. Changing the handgun or the crossbow out for a bow. They do get an additional special rule this time if they get skirmish. To be honest, skirmish and volley fire is nice. They get volley fire on the bows, which means you can shoot in multiple ranks. And they are 2 points cheaper than crossbows and handguns, but they are 24 inches and strength 3. So bearing in mind how shooting is anyway with ballistic skill 3, you want what shots you are making to count. And you also want to do it at range. So the fact that they've got a basic range of 24 inches, which is pretty typical across the board, but there are many out there that could outrange them, for example. The fact they're strength 3 instead of strength 4, skirmish just isn't enough to justify including archer units. To be honest, They need something more to justify taking these guys. I know they are 2 points cheaper, but shooting, I wouldn't say from these basic troops across the whole of 8th edition was massively effective, except in special cases, handgunners being one. And crossbows being pretty good as well, but general bows certainly not the best, and we saw that with things like skeleton archers, for example. So to be honest, there are just better options for ranged troops. Like I say, if you want a detachment, take handgunners. If you want to take a dedicated range unit, take the crossbows, pay the extra points, it'll be worth it. Next up then we have the Free Company Militia. So this is an interesting unit. Average everything with good leadership, low initiative, equipment is 2 hand weapons. Unit size is 10 plus, and they can have full command, and they've got special rules. Detachment. Right, so to be honest, I never use these guys. They can be detachment only. They cost the same as a halberdier, but they don't have the +1 strength, and they have no armor save. So they basically get the extra attack for having the extra hand weapon. Got no options for shields, no light armor. They're toughness 3, 1 wound. So you can remove these guys with even mediocre shooting and magic. We talked about bows. Well, even bows would be pretty useful at getting rid of these guys. You've only got to wound them. They're not rolling to save. So unless you've got a warrior priest who's going to give them the 5+ ward save, that's the only time they're going to get any type of save at all. And that's going to be a toss-up. I don't want to be looking to save my detachment of Free Company Militia when I can give a main unit re-roll wounds, for example, when they need it. So overall, Free Company Militia just didn't have anything stand out different that would make you want to take them or give them a specific role. I can say that extra attack, just not worth it, given they have zero save. The final core unit is the Knightly Orders. Now, above average weapon skill leadership, low strength, toughness, and initiative. They actually come with a hand weapon, lance, full plate armor, shield, and barding, and they can replace their lances with great weapons for free, which is actually quite nice. It means that you don't have to rely on the charge for the +2 strength, but you are going to be fighting last in combat. Now, you can upgrade your knights to Inner Circle Knights. You can only do that for 1 unit, but that is +3 points per model, and for that you gain an extra +1 strength. Now, you can have full command, unit size of 5+, and special rules. So it's a durable cavalry unit. It's got 2+ save. It's got an 8-inch move. That was rarely seen in the battlefield. However, at 22 points a model most of the time, halberdiers and handgunners were taken to meet the minimum core requirements, and you maximise the points in other areas. If you really want heavy cavalry, you'd be looking at Demigriff or Reichsguard, and which, while they're more expensive, you gain the extra strength and you get special rules on top of that. And that's the thing with the cavalry. They were already considered weak in the 8th edition. So if you're going to take a unit of cavalry, you need to take the best possible one that you can, rather than take mediocre cavalry. So you need to kill or severely damage what you're charging, and 1 attack at strength 3 just lacks the punch needed. Okay, you get strength 5 if you get the charge, but lots of options for people to move block you. We saw the vampire counts, bats, wolves, that sort of thing can move block the charge, and then you're vulnerable. And like I say, that Inner Circle, you become 25 points a model at that point for gaining the +1 strength. Again, better options in the core and better options for cavalry in the special. There you go. That brings us to the end of our core units look at the Empire in 8th edition. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope it was informative. If you did enjoy it, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't know, give it a thumbs down. Let me know why in the comments down below. And as always, if you want to see more content, hit that subscribe button. Totally free for you to do. Means a huge amount for me. So thank you for that in advance. You've been watching The Ghost Owl. Tune back in as we start to look at the Empire's special units.